Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Aleem and the team, for putting together such a wonderful event. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. People often ask me, well, what is it that I do? And we can come up with a lot of jargon and a lot of sophistication, but in very simple terms, we help companies raise money. This is to achieve their objectives or ambitions, but that's what the bottom line is. And that's quite challenging sometimes, particularly in current times, particularly if you use the old school or old models of doing things. So what I wanted to do today was just take you through some thought processes of how the market has changed, how the funding process therefore changes, what you could do in terms of tapping into the right pools of liquidity, and hopefully the key to it all is how could you successfully raise money for your projects. So I think without further ado, we've talked a little bit about the economic pressures, so I'm not going to dwell too much on it, but basically, clearly, times are changing. There's oil prices, but more importantly, lack of certainty on what it's going to be. It's low today, but what is it going to be tomorrow? That's driving quite a lot of investment decisions. So that's a pressure that we've got. We've got, as a result, some spending cuts. And of course, there's stuff that is happening in the international market that cannot be ignored. If China's demand for something reduces, that undoubtedly affects all of us. In addition to that, we've got some liquidity pressures, I'd say, or dynamics. I'll be careful in not saying that liquidity is scarce, because I don't think that's the case. It's the terms on which it can be provided. Those terms are changing. So deposits are clearly down, particularly as the oil revenues, etc., are no longer there for the banks. So that means that banks have to attract deposits at a higher rate, which is a cost, and that gets passed on through rate increases to you. GREs, part of what we see are getting funds on their own, and that, again, squeezes a little bit of the liquidity. And then one thing that gets a little bit ignored in the discussion, and it's boring, that's why it gets ignored, is the regulatory aspects. There are two major pieces of, I would call, regulatory or accounting changes that is affecting us as we speak. One's Basel III, and the other one is IFRS 9. Without going into detail, basically that reduces or impairs the ability of the lenders to lend at the same rates as they had been doing in the past. Now, not all is doom and gloom. All of this provides us with opportunities. Clearly, there are threats, but it does provide us with opportunity. And I wanted to, we'll go through some of these in more detail, but I just wanted to highlight, look, this is maybe a time to look through consolidations, to start to look at your business model, whether you could actually do some stuff that allows you to raise money more easily, or push the money raising onto other stakeholders. By providing them with some offtakes and other such mechanisms. I think being in a certain market may not be as beneficial, and so retrenching might also be something that is worth looking at, and also expanding to an area which allows extraordinary profit. So it's just looking through what are these opportunities that you have, and then how can you exploit them. I think the biggest message that I want to kind of relay as part of this presentation is we all kind of live in certain parameters. We've got these boxes. We live in a box that is around our perceptions of what can be achieved. I think if we can actually start to think, as they say, outside that box of perceptions, you'd find that there's actually still plenty of opportunity to raise funds. And so what I've actually highlighted is some of the areas that I think should definitely be started to explore in the region. We'll go into detail on some of these, but I've highlighted a couple that I'd definitely like us to take with us. We typically think of funding as literally either equity or debt, but there is a whole host of things in between. And I'm not just talking about basic mezz or alternative financing. I'm talking about people who would like to take institutional risk with some Class A issuance. They would want some options and make some extraordinary money as a result, but those are important aspects of your capital structure. So if we can start to think about debt, equity, and everything in between, we'll come up with a mixed capital structure that effectively just gives you the money to do what you need to do. Bottom line is, we're in the business of creating and generating value. And if, as to get to that point, and quickly, we need to perhaps share some of the profits with some of the financiers in this spectrum, then that's something that we ought to start thinking about. I said to you at the start, there's pools of liquidity available. Now, for some of you, the amount of green, which is effectively depth or good depth of pool of liquidity, might not seem what you are experiencing at the moment. And that might just simply be because I'm perhaps a very positive person, generally speaking, and so I might see things in a fair light. But I think if we can structure transactions well, you'd find that actually there are good pools of liquidity in a lot of these areas.